Hi everybody, welcome back to Hobby Farm on the Heights. I'm Ruth. Today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about garden planning and the things that I kind of take notes of and things I do to decide what goes where in my garden. I have most of my plants outside sunning themselves, the hardening off process. You can see the greenhouse is getting pretty empty today. But can I just say, these quarantine bangs are kind of getting out of control. Every time I look in the mirror, I'm like, ah! Anyway, I'm sure y'all are feeling the same way in some aspects. But let's talk garden planning. Before you plant your garden, you got to plan it, right? Of course, I am a list person. I love my lists, and so I usually make a list of things that I want to grow and plant, and then go from planning to the planting stage from there. But one trick that I do is and yes, my husband says I'm slightly OCD, but I plot my garden out on graph paper. I know, a little bit probably over the top. You may find this helpful, you may not, but the reason I do is I like everything to scale, and I like things straight and nice and neat, and I can plot out how many plants I'm gonna need usually. Sometimes I fudge because I never want to kill any plant, and so I'm like, oh yeah, I can get a little bit more in. But the good thing is the handy thing about this is I keep track of what I have planted where through the years. So right here I have, and I label, this is 2019 garden, so I know where I planted which, because I have a terrible memory. I think I've mentioned this before. Maybe y'all have better memories than I do. I can't remember where I've planted things. 2018, 2017, and I keep them, and then of course I have 2020 here, and I keep them, and so it keeps track of where I have grown which in my garden, so I can keep a good rotation around. I believe it was George Washington Carver that first did a lot of research on crop rotation in the South. He discovered that the cotton farmers down there were not getting very good yields because they were growing cotton like year after year after year after year. And so he showed them different crops to plant to rotate things around. And in modern farming techniques, we've often discovered that, building upon his research, soil will build up resistance and disease propensities if you grow the same crop over and over. And same with your garden. If you're trying to do things as natural as possible, I don't like using the word organic, but as natural as possible, crop rotation is going to be a key component to keeping bugs and disease under control. And so having your garden planned out, like this, you don't necessarily have to do it on, grid paper like I do, but I like things that way. But keeping track of where you have grown which so you can effectively rotate around is going to be handy. If you're noticing, oh, I grow tomatoes in this spot, and I've done this for like 3 years and my tomatoes are just getting worse and worse, well, try some crop rotation. You can see if you get a better production out of your plant. And so what I do is I have it planned out. I know where things have been, so I know how to rotate through. And I try about every 4 years not to have the exact same crop in the same place. And so like I showed you, I have 4 years worth of things. And then I can rotate back to the first year of planting. So it actually makes, if you keep records, it makes your planning easier. And so I never grow the same crop in the exact same spot until approximately 4 years later is what I like to do, to rotate around. Now it can get tricky because there's only so much space and there's only so much, this vegetable really loves tons of sun and this part of my garden gets the most sun, etc. But that's also the fun part. I like puzzles, and so it's kind of like a giant puzzle to me. And so I like putting it together. But I do make sure also in my garden planting that I don't plant things that hate each other by each other. And you may think, what in the world? But there's a book out there called, I think it's called, oh crud, now the name escapes me. But it's about companion planting is the term. And I usually look up when I'm in my planting process, I look up to verify that the plants do like each other. They're not going to basically war for the same nutrients. When we talk about companion planting, you want to develop a symbiotic relationship with the plants around it. So if they are both wanting the same nutrients out of the soil, neither is going to thrive. They just won't. That is why often it's called three sisters. The Native Americans grew corn and pole beans and squash together, and they formed a good symbiotic relationship because they each gives something that the other needs. And so the corn grows up and it provides basically the pole for the pole beans to grow up, and pole beans, green beans, provide nitrogen that the corn desperately needs to grow. And so thus it does really well together, and the squash forms a nice carpet on the ground for weed control. And so that is a good example of companion planting where they all work together to produce well. And so I try to do that in each aspect of my garden. I always plant basil next to my tomatoes, and I always incorporate a lot of flowers like cosmos and marigolds and different flowers and herbs distributed around my garden for pollination and for that symbiotic relationship. And so it's said that basil makes tomatoes sweeter. Now, I don't have scientific evidence to back this up besides my own taste buds. And the tomatoes are just really good. The last few years I've been doing this, the tomatoes have been excellent. Now that's also due to some yummy heirloom varieties, but you get the picture. So anyway, and keeping track of the years, I don't put potatoes following my tomatoes. So if a tomato, I've grown this, this particular spot had tomatoes, I don't put the next year potatoes in there because they're in the same nightshade family. And so you want to look up what families each of the vegetables are in to know if you're taking the nutrients of that same soil out. It's not only nutrients that you're draining out of the soil, but also disease. If there is a particular disease like potato blight, it would be attack your tomatoes too, and potatoes and peppers, because they're all in the nightshade family. And so if they're related, they'll be susceptible to the same diseases, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm rambling now. Anyway, so I was just going to try to give you a few tips on what I do to plan my garden out, because it is getting to be where we can almost plant our warm season vegetables. I'm aiming for about May 1st. We'll see if the weather's been kind of moderate lately. I'm really looking for those nighttime temperatures to hold above 50. That's really what I'm looking for right now. Although we're not freezing, it's been hovering around 45, 46 at night. And I'd like it to get a little bit, yeah, like I said, about 50 at night to get a good warm soil temperature to get those warm season crops growing well and not just sitting kind of stunted in my dirt doing nothing, because it seems a little ridiculous. So hopefully about May 1st. Now, some of you are saying, you know, I didn't go to all the trouble to start seeds, and that looks like a lot of trouble, and frankly, sometimes it is. There are some great local nurseries, garden centers, to get plants from. Nice, good, healthy plants that you can just plan your garden and plant your garden, which sounds very simple, doesn't it? I agree. This is how I used to do it before I got into the whole seed starting thing. But I would recommend looking for a local place here in the Tri-Cities area where I am, southeastern Washington. We have a couple good places that are inexpensive. I think inexpensive compared to your big box stores like Lowe's and Home Depot. And the people that work there are gonna be way more knowledgeable about your plants they're purchasing. If you have any questions about them, you can ask questions. Max Garden Center is a great place to buy. They're really economical when it comes to buying plants. And also the other one I bought plants at, and I did buy my potato seed there this year and green bean seed is Columbia Grain and Feed. And they are always super helpful and super knowledgeable. And you can get 4 plants for, I believe, $1.69. So to us here, it's a good price. Anyway, so you can get to garden planning and figuring out what you want to grow, where you want to grow at, based on what you've grown before in your garden and what you're going to plant around it are the 2 key components, I think, in planting and planning a garden. And hopefully this helps and you can have great success in your garden. Thanks for watching.